Welcome, welcome. I do recognize some of those names, so welcome back to those of you who have been here before. For those of you who have not, we are the Marine Environmental Education Center located out on Hollywood Beach, Florida. And unfortunately, we are closed for the time being. We are a pretty small facility. It's just not possible for us to open to the public right now, but we are hopefully making plans moving forward. Until then, we are trying to host a bunch of really cool webinar series to still promote education, marine science knowledge, and connect with the community. So I'm glad that you're all here today to learn a little bit about sharks. Today, we are lucky enough that the director of our awesome facility, Dr. Derek Burkholder, is going to be giving us a shark dissection today. He is going to give us a little background on that awesome species and then do a virtual dissection. To make sure that we could all hear most clearly, we are keeping everyone muted and everyone's cameras off just so there are no distractions. If you're having issues seeing Dr. Burkholder while he's doing the dissection, make sure that you are on the speaker view mode. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, throw them into the chat. There should be a little chat option at the bottom. So just click on that and you'll be able to write to us. I will try to troubleshoot any sort of technical issues you might be having from afar. Otherwise, Dr. Burkholder will get to all of your questions at the end of the presentation. I think that is about it for me. So whenever you're ready, Derek, please take it away.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for coming out today. We're excited to be here once again as part of our virtual education program here. And thank you, Taylor, very much. As she said, my name is Derek Burkholder. I'm a research scientist at Nova Southeast University, and very, very lucky to work with a number of different research groups at NSU. As she said, I am director here at the Marine Environmental Education Center. I'm also director of the Broward County Sea Turtle Conservation Program, and we get to manage and take a look and monitor all of the nesting beaches here in Broward County. It's about 24 miles of beach for nesting sea turtles throughout the season, which just finished up for this year. And then I also get to work with the Guy Harvey Research Institute and the Save Our Seas Shark Center at NSU. They're working with Dr. Mahmood Shivji. I'm very fortunate to work with students to get people out on the boat with us and doing our shark research, but actually get to be hands-on and join us on the research vessel, come on our expeditions, and actually take part catching the sharks, tagging, measuring, and releasing them obviously back into the water again. So today I want to tell you just a little bit about sharks in general, and then we will be doing a little dissection with this little lemon shark that we've got here right now. So just in case you guys are wondering, this is an animal that was unfortunately had gotten caught in what we call a ghost net. So one of the big issues that many parts of our marine environment deal with is pollution. And that goes everything from plastics and microplastics to fishing gear to nutrients, all kinds of different things. But one of the things that happens is we get fishing gear and especially nets that are drifting around out there, and they're still doing their job very well. They're still catching fish. And unfortunately for a shark, most of our shark species have to be able to swim to breathe. And so if they get tangled up in those nets drifting around, they can suffocate and die. Unfortunately, our sea turtle program was called for a sea turtle that was trapped in some netting. So we're able to respond from our emergency line. We're able to travel out there, find this animal, and it was entangled. We were able to get it untangled and released. But in the process, we also found about 30 feet of net that had about 40 other dead animals in it, including a number of different shark species, including this little guy right here. So this wasn't something that was gone out and killed for this particular presentation. This was one that unfortunately had passed away, stuck in that net, and we're going to just get a little bit more information out of it to hopefully teach you guys a little bit something about these amazing animals. So when we talk about sharks, they are one of those groups that has a huge diversity. There's actually over 500 species of sharks worldwide. They could range anywhere from the largest shark out there is the whale shark, upwards of 40 to 50 feet long, all the way down to a guy that's about 8 inches long and lives in the deep sea, little dwarf cat shark, very, very small, like I said, max size about 8 inches long. So huge diversity out there. Like I said, this one is a lemon shark. One of the ways that we're able to tell that as we're looking at this animal, one of the ways that is really easy to tell a lemon shark apart from many other species is if we look at their dorsal fins. So on the back here, this two dorsal fins. The first one is always that iconic shark fin that you think of from the movies, cutting through the water. The first dorsal fin is usually quite a bit bigger than the second one. But in lemon sharks, they're almost the same size as you can see here. So that's one way that's really easy for us to tell these guys apart. But coming back to our sharks in general, like I said, over 500 different species of these guys worldwide. They're all very, very, very important in these areas where they live. Many of these sharks are at or near the top of the food chain, so they play a critical role in helping to structure and balance our marine ecosystems out there. They filter out some of the sick, dead, injured animals, but they also help keep populations in check. When we talk about over 500 species ranging from very small to very big, they also kind of fit into all parts of the food chain as well. Not every one of them is at the top. Some of them are eaten by other animals, so they provide food. Obviously, they do eat other things as well. So it's really important to kind of get a good understanding of what, sort of role these sharks do play in their ecosystem. There's been lots of research kind of looked at, how much a shark eats and how that might impact their prey and things like that. But there's been a little bit less just kind of looking at the general impact that sharks have in their ecosystems. The biology of fear, as we like to call it, can play a pretty strong role in changing behaviors of other animals. And sharks have a pretty good role, they use that biology of fear pretty well. So the idea behind that is sharks being even just in an area might change the behaviors of the things that they would normally eat. So for instance, I was very fortunate to work in a place called Shark Bay in Western Australia. Shark Bay is very aptly named. It's out in the middle of nowhere, the very western tip of Australia. There's lots of animals there. The world's largest dugong herds in the world are there. That's kind of like our manatees here in Florida. Huge populations of sea turtles, loggerhead green sea turtles, dolphins, sea snakes, cormorants, lots of fish, and then obviously the sharks as well. There, the tiger sharks really kind of play a big role in that ecosystem. The tiger sharks do eat all those other animals, the sea turtles, the dugongs, the dolphins, the sea snakes, the fish, even some of the seabirds there. And what we found in Shark Bay is that the behaviors of the tiger sharks can change what all these other animals are doing. It might change where they're going. For instance, the dugongs that were animals that are feeding on seagrass. They like to spend their time in the very shallow seagrass areas, lots of great food for them. But when the sharks show up, they move out to the edge of the seagrass, over to deeper water. The food's not nearly as good a quality, but if they encounter a shark, they've got a great place to get away from it pretty easily. Same thing with the dolphins. When they're around, they're spending their time out in those deep channels where most of the sharks are hanging out in the shallow. So it's pretty interesting to see that whole populations will change kind of where they're going. They'll even change how they're feeding. Going back to our dugongs in Shark Bay, the dugongs eat seagrasses, and they'll either crop just the leaves, kind of like mowing the lawn, just nip off the top of the leaf, or if they're really getting in there, they'll actually dig up the roots and something called a rhizome, which is what's below ground. They dig that up and eat the entire plant. But what happens again when the sharks show up and they're around, they'll only go back to that cropping where they're just getting the little tops of the seagrass. They're not getting as much food, but they're able to keep their head up and keep a little more vigilant or keep an eye out for any sharks that might be coming around. So these sharks do play a big role in sort of what these animals are doing, how they're behaving, and can really change how an ecosystem works. Sharks, again, like I said, are incredibly interesting animals. They have evolved. They've been around for 400 million years on Earth. And they're pretty good at what they do. We're going to talk a little bit more about their anatomy here in a little bit when we start the dissection. But some of these things with sharks is they've got some other senses that we don't have. So they can do all the things that we can. They can see, hear, touch, smell, all that kind of stuff. But they've got a sixth sense called the anatomy is called the Ampule of Lorenzini. So if I hold my little guy up right here, I know it's going to be hard to see, but right on the nose of these sharks, there's little black dots. Those little black dots are called Ampule of Lorenzini. You can see that at all. So those ampullae are actually little pores that are filled with the gel at the bottom. And what happens is these can pick up electric fields in the water. So anything living in the water is sending out little electric fields. Every time my muscle moves, a neuron fires in my brain, it sends out a very weak electric pulse in the water. It's so weak, we can't, we don't know what's happening. We don't know it's there. But these amazing animals have developed this sense that they can actually pick that up and use that to kind of locate prey. So if you've ever seen photos or video of a hammerhead shark, that great big wide head on a hammerhead, hammerheads do this very well because they do have that really wide head. They've got a lot of these Ampule of Lorenzini. And so what that does, it allows them to use that to their advantage. One of their favorite foods are stingrays. And a lot of stingray species will actually bury themselves in the sand and kind of hunker down to not be able to be detected by predators quite so easily. Luckily for the hammerhead, you see a lot of videos. Sometimes they're nosing around with their face just off the sand. And what they're doing is they're using those Ampule of Lorenzini to try to pick up the electric field of that ray buried under the sand. When they do, they might scare them up, grab lunch, and then go back to cruising around again. So it's pretty interesting to see kind of how they've developed to really make a good use of these areas where they live. Again, sharks are, one of the things about sharks is that they're very slow growing. Many are very long lived. And unfortunately, they don't have very many babies at a time. And so one of the things when we start talking about sharks, and really when we look at shark conservation, is trying to look at sort of how we use sharks around the world. And unfortunately, humans do use sharks for a lot of things. One of the big ones, obviously, if you have ever heard of shark fin soup, is going to be those fins. We use those, put it into the soup, make it a little delicacy dish. And these guys have been very heavily targeted for those fins around the world. We also use their skin to make a very strong leather. Shark skin is made up of something called dermal denticles. So if we break that down, dermal skin, denticle, dentition, like teeth. So shark skin is actually made up of little modified teeth covering their whole body, called those dermal denticles. And that allows them to move very easily through the water. They're all kind of pointed back, so they're very hydrodynamic. The water flows over them very easily. They're very strong, so it gives them a nice protective layer. And if you ever have a chance to touch a shark, if you sort of pet it from the head to the tail, it's pretty smooth. But if you go from the tail to the head, it's like rubbing your finger against sandpaper, because that's actually going against the points of that skin teeth or the dermal denticles as you're moving your finger along the shark skin. So we use the sharks their skin for leathers, things like belts, wallets, shoes, stuff like that. We use, obviously, their teeth and jaws can be used for decoration. So you can go into a lot of shops and you might see something like this, a shark jaw to hang on your wall, have a shark tooth necklace, pull those out. And we also have things, trophy fishing. People go out and try to catch these sharks. We do eat the meat from many species as well. They get used in medicines, things like shark cartilage pills. And they even get put into things like makeup and lotion. So if you ever take a look at any of the products you're using, if it says squalene anywhere in the list of ingredients, that's going to be shark liver oil that has gone into those products. And so these things are used in lots of different ways around the world. And unfortunately, that's kind of having a pretty big impact on our sharks. So like I said, over 500 species of sharks around the world, over 25% of those are endangered or critically endangered around the world right now. And many more being added to that list all the time. Because of all those uses, we take a pretty significant number of sharks out of the water every year. It's one of the things when I talk to students, talk to people on our research boats and things like that, you might ask, how many sharks do people kill all the way around the world every year? And people say 1,000 or 2,000 or 100,000. Somebody will say 1 million and laugh like that was a fun joke or something like that. I wish any of those numbers were correct. Unfortunately, it's actually over 100 million sharks. All right, let that number sink in a little bit. 100 million sharks are being killed every single year around the world to make all of that happen. So it's pretty terrifying to think that many are coming out of the water. Like I said, they grow very slowly. Some of them don't even start reproducing until they're in their, teens, maybe 20 years old or more. Many of them don't have more than a few babies at a time. Some species, like the sand tiger shark, will only have 1 or 2 babies at a time, and they may not have babies every year. So it's really, really slow to reproduce or replenish the population. And we're taking over 100 million of them out of the water every single year. So that does play a big impact on their populations. Like I said, a lot of their numbers are going down very, very quickly. And that's why at NSU, we're doing a lot of research to try to study these animals a little bit more. Dr. Mahmood Shivji with the Guy Harvey Research Institute, the Save Our Sea Sharks Lab, has been using genetic tools to study things like the shark fin trait for many years. He's also using different tools called satellite tags to look at the movements of these animals as they're cruising around as well. So we do a lot of different kinds of tagging studies. A lot of them will just put a little tag in the dorsal fin. It's got a number on it. It's the same tags we put on a cow or a pig's ear on a farm. We put that in their dorsal fin, release them again. And if we ever see that shark, we know that we've caught it before. We know how much it's grown, how far it's moved since it's been away, things like that. But there's a lot more that we can't learn with that because we have to catch it again to get that additional information. So there are other tags called a satellite tag that we use quite often, and Dr. Shivji uses quite often with the Guy Harvey Research Institute. And what that tag does, we mount it on the fin of the shark or put it on their on the side of them there. And anytime the fin breaks the surface of the water, that tag is going to ping a satellite, send us a notification telling us where that shark is anywhere in the world. So it's an amazing tool to look at the movement of these animals, kind of figure out their migration routes, what they're doing for longer periods of time. So we hope to get about a year out of these tags. Some of them we've had over 3 years of information out of a single animal, which provides incredible data on where they're going, how fast they're moving, seasonal patterns, things like that. We've also found with the Mako Sharks, which is the fastest shark in the ocean, up to about 56 miles an hour. They're a lot of fun. They're targeted a lot in our sport fishing, recreational fisheries because they jump and flip and flop, and they're a lot of fun to catch on a rod and reel. And they're also ones that does get eaten fairly regularly as well. And so that's one that we thought was being pretty, well managed, and the population are doing well. From our satellite tagging, it was found that upwards of maybe over 30% of our animals that have had satellite tags put on have been caught and killed, usually in less than about 6 months from release. And so it's much, much, much higher rate of removal than we originally thought. So there's now a lot of work going in to reclassify this species to maybe protect them a little bit more in these areas where they congregate in bigger numbers and are moving at different times of the year. So it's pretty incredible to see kind of what information you can pull out of some of these research techniques, and try to figure out ways to, like I said, keep these important animals in our waters a little bit more. So now I want to come in and talk a little bit more about the anatomy of the shark itself. So when we look at the outside of the shark, we already looked at those Ampule of Lorenzini, the little dots on their nose that helps them with the electric sense. We've also got, as we come up here, we've got our eyes. So just like us, a couple eyes, they've got something called many species of shark have something called a nictitating membrane. It's a little bit like their eyelid, but it's actually much harder and more protective. And so what happens is, sharks have a lot of teeth, which is great for them to catch their food, but a lot of the things that they're eating also have teeth and spines of their own. And so these sharks want to be able to protect themselves when they're coming in to grab a bite at dinner. So what they'll do is they'll come in, and that nictitating membrane will actually be able to cover their eye up and protect them from any of those spines or anything as they're coming in for their final bite. If we look at the bottom of the head here, these little dots on the side, these are the nares, or the nose. So that's the nostrils of these sharks. And sharks have an incredible sense of smell. These guys can, detect blood or something like that in the water from pretty long distances. And, it gives them a great way to find their food and prey in the ocean. We've already talked about the two dorsal fins, especially on the lemon shark here, where they're almost the same size. With most species, the second dorsal fin would be much, much, much smaller. We've got the tail. So a dolphin's tail moves up and down. A fluke's tail moves up and down through the water. These guys are going to move theirs side to side to push themselves through the water. We've got their pectoral fins, which are the ones up here on the side. That allows them to, almost like the wings of an airplane, to provide lift or move them up and down in the water column. We've got their pelvic fins back here. And then if we look at the side of the head, a little bit hard to see here, but these slits right here are called gill slits. So that's going to be their gills. We'll take a little closer look at that here in a minute. But what I was saying before, when this guy was caught in that net, it can actually suffocate. And the reason for that is most sharks are what we call ram ventilators. So you can see they've just got that gill slit here. If you look at the side of the head of a bony fish, they've got that something called an operculum, that bony covering. You look at a fish in a fish tank, they're doing this with the side of their head quite often. What they're doing is they're moving that bony operculum in and out. And what that does, it moves water over their gills and they can pull the oxygen out to breathe. Sharks don't have that opportunity. So what they do is they swim around with their mouth open, water goes in through their mouth and flows out over their gills through those gill slits to be able to breathe. There are some exceptions. One of those, the nurse shark, which is one of our most prevalent species here in South Florida. The nurse shark, if you do any snorkeling, diving, or look at any pictures, a lot of times you'll see them sleeping or resting on the bottom, sleeping under the rocks or reef or in a little cave kind of setup. And the reason they can do that, they don't have to move all the time because they've got some muscles in their neck called a bugle pump. That's something that allows them to move that musculature and allows them to pull water into their mouth and expel it out again. For the nurse shark, that's great because it does allow them to sleep most of the day. Would be kind of nice, right? But also what it does is that's one of the ways that they catch their food. So one of the favorite foods of a nurse shark are going to be things like, lobster, crab, fish, but they also love conch. And so a conch, in the shell, what they can do is they can actually create a vacuum with that bugle pump and pull a conch clean out of its shell to have it for dinner. They've done some studies and found that the vacuum power of that is the same as 12 Hoover vacuum cleaners all at the same time. So they can move a lot of water and a lot using that musculature in their neck. Excuse me. So we've got the gills there. Obviously the jaw of the shark here. If we look in here, we're going to take a look at the one that I showed here just a second ago. But in the mouth, you can see all the little teeth they've got there. I know, again, I'll use the bigger jaw here in just a second. But what we see with these sharks, and another great adaptation for our sharks, is if I flip this jaw around, you can see on the back of the jaw, rows and rows and rows of teeth, all right? So what happens is these sharks need sharp, fresh teeth all the time to make sure they've got something to catch their food. And so what happens is if they break a tooth or lose a tooth or something like that, the next one's on a little bit of a conveyor belt, will roll up and be ready to go in about 24 to 48 hours. So they've usually got, sometimes 7 or more rows of teeth all ready and kind of just in that conveyor belt, always moving forward so that there's always teeth ready to go. Many sharks will have upwards of 10,000 teeth over the course of their lifetime because they continuously grow them and continuously lose them throughout their life. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to start that dissection and we're going to take a look at some of the internal anatomy. So again, we've got on the outside, we've got those Ampule of Lorenzini. We got their eyes, their nose, the skin, all the fins that they're using to move themselves around. And then as we start to go inside, there's a couple of other things and so like I said, this is a shark that was caught in a net. This is not one that's been preserved for dissections or anything like that. So there is going to be a little bit of blood. So don't worry about that, but just be ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut into the body cavity right here, and then I'll turn it so you can see it a little bit better. Yeah. And remember, their skin is very, very strong. So even with these razor sharp scissors, it takes a little bit to do here. All right, now as we start getting in here a little bit, what we're gonna see, sorry, just one more thing to make it a little easier to see here. All right, so when we open this up here, one of the first things we're gonna see are these great big long things right here. And that's gonna be the liver of the shark. All right, that's very, very important for our sharks. So many fish, many bony fish have something called a swim bladder. It's this little sac inside, almost like a lung that they can fill with air. And that allows them to help maintain their buoyancy, or how much they float or sink in the water, by changing how much air is in that, that air bladder. And so sharks don't have that. They've got this great big liver right here. And this thing is full of oil. Like I said before, in how we use sharks, one of the things that we have is shark liver oil. So in some species, this liver can be upwards of half the weight of the entire animal can be in the liver. So there's a huge amount of oil there. And that oil is very buoyant, or it floats. And so that allows and provides the shark with some lift, and it allows them to stay pretty neutrally buoyant in the water. So these livers are very important. Obviously, it's also what's helping filter out some of the toxins, things like that, in their bodies. As we look in here, you can see this a little bit. So right here in the middle, we go up from where these two lobes of the liver come together. That's going to be the heart of the shark right here. See that at all? All right, so just like us, that's what's pumping the blood around their body. Right central, kind of very similar to kind of where ours would be, sort of the top of the chest, and that's sort of the chest cavity. And that's where that heart's going to be. I'm going to actually take some of this liver out of here just so it's a little bit easier to see in here. So we've also got this little green part here. We got the, sorry, let's see where we're at. So as we move down, we've also got, this guy was very hungry. You can see his stomach is completely empty. So just like us, these guys are going to have a stomach, and then moving into an intestine. Unlike ours, which is lots of little curls and twists and things moving throughout our abdomen, sharks have something called a spiral valve. So inside this one tube here of the intestine is a whole little coil of tissue that allows for nutrient absorption, just like us. The food's being digested in the stomach, being broken down, going into our intestine, and that's where the nutrients are being absorbed into the body. But like I said, it's not something you can really see very easily in this setup. But instead of having coils and coils and coils of an intestine like we do, it's much shorter, but it's got that spiral valve inside there that allows for that nutrient absorption. Up here on the liver. We've also got the gallbladder, so this little green spot here. As we move in, we can take a look at the stomach. Like I said, it does look pretty empty, but we can cut in here just to see if anything that was going on in there. Yeah, right now, pretty empty. You can see he was pretty hungry here when he got into that net. All these little ridges in the stomach, if you can see that, that's going to be, again, just to provide some more surface area for some of the nutrient absorption in the stomach. So I'm going to try to take a more in-depth look at the gills here. So for these sharks, the gill is how they're going to be breathing. So that's how they're going to remove oxygen out of the water. They're not breathing air at the surface like we do, so they have to be able to get it out of the water itself. So if I cut into one of these gill slits, if we look here, this arch right here is actually the gill. All right, we've got the gill arch right here, this white part. See any of that? And then all these little red filaments here are the gill filaments. And that's little tiny blood vessels that run through here and provide a huge amount of surface area that the water can move across, or, move through, and you can get gas exchange, so pulling the oxygen out of the water to be able to breathe for these guys. So these gills are very efficient in the water, can really move a lot of gas out of the water that way. And again, it's through those gill slits, so they don't have that operculum, so they're relying on that ram ventilation to be able to do that. For these guys, it's quite difficult to get into the actual brain case, but the top here, we can try. We'll see if any of these tools will actually let me get in there. It's going to be quite small compared to some species. These guys are pretty well hardwired for trying to find their next meal and making sure they live to the next day. So they're looking for food, looking to keep their populations going. And they're, like I said, pretty good at it. They've been around for a very long time. They're very well adapted to their environment. And yeah, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get in here today. Take a look at this, I think. All right. So one thing I'm going to try here as well. All right. So if we take a cross section here, what we're looking at is going to be right here. This is the vertebrae of the shark, this white spot. So just like our backbone, they've got a vertebrae, but sharks are very different from us in that they have no bones. All of their skeleton is made out of cartilage. And so, any of this stuff, even those vertebrae are all going to be cartilage. So for us, we've got some cartilage in our body, right? The nose, our ears, that stuff that's kind of hard, kind of soft. But for the sharks, that provides their entire skeleton. So it's great for them in the water, provides good structure for their muscles to attach to. It allows them, quite a bit of flexibility as they're moving around. But when they come out of water, they don't do quite as well on land and things like that because their body is not really designed to support that weight out of the water. So they do have that vertebrae throughout. So one of the neat things about sharks is if we can look at a deceased shark like this, there's actually ways to figure out how old that shark is by looking at their vertebrae. Now this one hasn't been prepared for that because, like I said, this is just caught in a net. But there are ways to actually stain in the vertebrae. It lays rings down as the animals grow. So just like a tree ring will grow each year as the tree is growing, you got to count those rings, figure out how old the tree is. You do the same thing with a shark. They lay sometimes a couple rings a year, depends on the species, but there's been a lot of research studying those growth rings in the vertebrae to get an idea of how old these animals are getting. Like I said before, they're very long-lived. There's recent studies found that great whites live upwards to 80, 90 years old, something like that. There's a shark called the Greenland shark, which is actually one of the longest living vertebrates we think on the planet. They've estimated upwards of 400 to 500 years old for a Greenland shark. So they're very long-lived in these areas where they live, in our oceans. So with the sharks, these guys are solid muscle. You can see all around here, they've got both red and white muscle fibers, which is some for burst, very fast speed swimming, and other for just the general moving their tail back and forth, gliding through the water to be able to, use little energy for a long time versus a sprint to be, maybe try to catch food or something like that. And this one, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see this or not, but I just went through the dorsal fin of the shark. Obviously, on a much bigger shark, this would be a lot more here, but this is what we're going to be looking at when you're talking about shark fin soup. So you look at it from the side, this has been frayed a little bit right here. You can see that. That frayed part, those are called Serrata Trachea. So those little hair-like filaments, that is what you're actually going to be eating in a bowl of shark fin soup. So they're going to boil that. It acts a little bit like a noodle in the soup once it's done. From my understanding, this really has kind of no flavor. It's a little bit like eating your fingernails for dinner. And it has no nutritional value, but unfortunately is something that is used quite a bit around the world for that shark fin soup. Those serrata trachea are what gives the structure to these fins and allows them to move them around for changing their direction, moving their fins up and down to raise themselves up and down in the water column, things like that. So let's see, what else can we look at here? This particular animal was a female. We can tell that if we look at the bottom side of the shark here, these are the pelvic fins, and if it was a male, they would have claspers. There would be two claspers that run right out here. So that's an easy way to tell male and female apart. Is obviously the females don't have that, the males do. Females also have much thicker skin on their pectoral fins up at the base here, because that's actually one of the ways that these guys will mate, is the male will bite onto that pectoral fin to be able to mate and get into position. And so that's obviously you got a very a mouth full of very sharp teeth, and so they've actually developed those defenses almost to be able to protect themselves during that mating, to have a little bit more protection on that fin so they don't get torn up too awful much during that process. That's kind of what I've got to learn from our little lady here. But I would love to try to take any questions you might have at this time. We can take those right to the chat, or if anybody has anything.
Perfect. Well, we will give everyone a second to write in the chat. While we're waiting, I'll ask one of the questions that we always get when you are caught on camera. How did you actually get into the shark field, and what would you recommend for people trying to get into the shark fields?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the things as scientists, I was very fortunate in being able to work with a number of very, very fantastic mentors over the years. I went to a small college, Albion College in Michigan, and was able to meet Dr. Jeff Carrier there. He has been working with nurse sharks and reproduction for many, many, many years in the Florida Keys. And I was able to work with him at Albion. And through connections that I made with Jeff, I was able to meet sort of some of the people who ended up becoming my PhD advisor, Dr. Mike Heithaus at Florida International University. I was able to spend a summer at National Geographic in Washington, D.C., working with the Critter Cam series. So they were developing and using animal-borne video cameras and research tools that they could mount on, say, the fin of a shark or the shell of a sea turtle or something like that, follow them around from the animal's point of view and learn much more about what these guys were doing. And I met Mike there, and we were able to work together to develop a PhD project. That's how I was able to kind of get into this field to start with. But one of the things that I always recommend to students when you're looking at a research field is, I would definitely recommend trying to focus on the questions that you're interested in. What kinds of things do you want to learn about? And then try to find the model that works best to do that. Sharks are one of those animals that they're amazing to work with, don't get me wrong, but they're also very hard to work with. They're large animals. They spend their entire lives at sea. And so you can't get huge numbers of them out there. They're hard to work with at times. Obviously, I do have most of my fingers and toes at this point, so you can do it safely as long as you're careful and learn the proper ways to do it. But, my recommendation is always to try to figure out what kind of questions you're interested in. Are you interested in behavior? Are you interested in how the body works? Are you interested in physiology? Those kinds of things. And then start basing your research and your questions around that rather than say, I really like sharks, how do I work with sharks? Because that's going to limit you a lot more in what you can do, is what I've kind of found over the years. Great question. So I see from Luke, do we name the sharks we catch? That's a great question. Like I said, a lot of the sharks we catch get a number tag. So they all that number is generally going to be the name that we use for them. It's easier to keep track of, things like that. However, for those satellite tracked animals, we do name a lot of those. And one of the pretty exciting programs we have, not only for sharks, but also for sea turtles, is you can actually donate to our programs, help support the research. And by doing so, you are able to actually name some of those sharks that we are tracking. So for the Guy Harvey Research Institute and Dr. Mahmood Shivji, he has a satellite tracking website. If you go to GHRI-tracking.org, that's the Guy Harvey Research Institute tracking.org, you can actually follow a lot of these satellite tracked sharks around that he's been following. I'm doing a lot of this similar research with sea turtles here in South Florida. Turtletracking.org, you can take a look at that and follow these animals around a little bit more as well. So those, we do name them just because it's something that you can actually follow on the website. So it's nice to have a name associated with those. But otherwise, we try to keep it to the numbers or something like that to keep it a little bit easier to keep track of. Great question. This species, for anybody that came in late, this was a lemon shark. This is a very small one. And again, if you came in late, this one unfortunately had been caught in a what we call a ghost net, a fishing net that had been either lost or broken or cast away or something. For whatever reason, it was drifting around without anybody keeping track of it. We had been called because there was a live sea turtle entangled in that same net. We went to retrieve the sea turtle. When we pulled it up, there was about 30 feet of net there that had, dozens of animals, including a number of sharks, unfortunately, which is where this guy came. He was dead, or she was dead in that net, and that's how we got this particular lemon shark. Great question.
How long do lemon sharks grow?
How big do lemon sharks get? Sharks in general are going to grow for their entire lifetime. They don't really stop. They will definitely slow down as the bigger they get. Lemon sharks can get upwards of, that 10 feet, something like that, maybe a little bit more. But they can definitely be a decent sized shark. And they're one that we're always very, very, very careful with working next to the boat because even a 10-foot long lemon shark is incredibly flexible, and it can actually fold itself in half and bite its own tail. So you might think you're kind of really safe back here measuring something at the tail, but it can actually come around all the way around and have its mouth right there with you. So we're always very, very careful when we're working with these lemon sharks. Great question.
Connor would like to know how big the liver of a whale shark is.
Wow, great question. So how big is the liver of a whale shark? And to be perfectly honest, I have no idea. I would have to check that out myself. As the biggest shark and actually the biggest fish in the ocean, I'm sure it is huge. But I actually don't know what sort of proportion of the body is made up of that. I'm not sure. I would actually have to look at that myself. That's a fantastic question.
Angie would like to know, why don't people make laws to save sharks?
All right, so Angie was asking, why don't we make laws to protect sharks? And in some cases we do. You know, that's a hard question. It's a great question, and it's something that I hope to see a lot more of going forward. But there are some species like the great white shark, the sawfish, which are actually raised, but they're you know, they look a lot more like a shark. Even the bull sharks and lemon sharks and things like that in some areas around the world are protected. All the hammerhead species in different places around the world are protected to some degree. There are some that are protected on much more global scale, like the white sharks. There are some species like the lemon sharks and hammerheads and bull sharks and things that in Florida waters are protected much more heavily than in other areas of the world. In Florida state waters, it's illegal to kill many of these other species like the lemon shark and the hammerheads. But unfortunately, that Florida state waters only goes about 3 miles offshore. So at 3.1 miles, they're free game again. So that's where, when we talk about sharks and many other of these what we call highly migratory species in the ocean, they don't have little borders that they're sticking on. They can travel tens of thousands of miles a year. And so, and in doing so, they travel the waters of many different countries around the world. And so it is a very difficult question and a very difficult problem when we talk about conservation of sharks and other, like I said, highly migratory species, is trying to figure out how to protect them everywhere they go. And that's why we're trying to use those satellite tags to learn exactly what that looks like, and hopefully from there be able to start. And there's many fantastic people working on these laws and getting them put into place to try to protect sharks in different areas. But it can be a hard sell. You have a shark that many people are very scared of. They're not a cute, cuddly little cat or dog. It's something that many people are scared of. And so when you're starting from that basis of fear, like we talked about before, kind of in a different context, but when you're talking about that, it really is hard to get people excited about them in some cases. So it's something that many fantastic people are working on, and it's something that hopefully we'll see a lot more of in the future. Great question.
Awesome. Angie says, if no one's going to make a law about saving sharks, then I will, and I'll make a law about saving sea turtles. So good luck. I think that's a great thing to strive for, a great goal. Jose shared, take a look at what shark allies are doing regarding laws to protect sharks. So thank you for sharing. If we stop killing sharks for just 1 year, we're saving 100,000 million sharks. Good point. Recently, Florida passed a law to ban all kinds of trade of shark fins in our state. And Lauren, age 7, wants to know where lemon sharks live.
All right, great question. Where do lemon sharks live? So lemon sharks seem to like sort of the tropical, subtropical waters. So we have them a lot here in Florida, but also around the Caribbean, Bahamas, things like that. Lemon sharks are pretty cool because they'll actually spend their early years as small animals. They'll live up in mangrove creeks and things like that, relatively shallow water. Even something like this size would generally, be in a little bit more protected areas. And then the adults, will move around a little bit more. But there's actually been some amazing research done at the Shark Lab in Bimini in the Bahamas. And there's been a lot of work done with the lemon shark there. And they've actually found, because they've been doing this for decades now, they've actually found sharks that they tagged as babies that had been born that year. They go out each year and they catch absolutely as many of them as they can in those mangroves and the shallows on the flats, and they tag all of them with a little pit tags, the same thing you put in your cat and dog. And what happens, they continue to look for those over the course of the life of these animals. They've actually found, some of these animals they tagged as babies coming back, 18, 20 years later to the exact same place where they were born, 20 years before. So it's really incredible to see, even though they might move around a little bit, they can be home bodies as well, in different parts of their lives. Great question.
Very nice. Jennifer Story says, we caught a shark with you on June 17th, 2017. Sophia named it Troy. Unfortunately, it had a plastic tag. Is there any way to see if it's been caught again?
Great question. So those number tags that we use, those plastic tags, like she's saying, we do have to recapture those to be able to get additional information. So you're wondering if we've actually caught that shark again, and we do keep a whole database of that, and that's something that I would happily look at. I do not remember that particular animal. We actually have a very low rate of recapture right now. So about 2% of our sharks, actually 1.5 to 2% already have tags in them. So it's pretty rare that we actually get that in the first place. And so I would have to look back in our database, but off the top of my head, I don't remember catching that particular shark again. But that's a great question. The satellite tags are a little bit easier because they're actually actively pinging and telling us where that shark is, rather than us having to catch it or somebody else catch it and call us up and tell us where it is. Good question.
Awesome. Steven says, if you catch a shark outside of 3 miles in Florida, is it still legal to bring it ashore?
Great question. It depends on the species. Some of them are protected, nationally, even globally, things like that. So it depends on the species. But if it is one that is legal to catch in that area, yes, you are able to transport it through that 3 mile zone to go back to the dock. But they can, try to figure out where it came from if you do get stopped. So you have to have ways to kind of show that it was taken outside of that zone. Good question.
Nice. Good to know. And Angie says, poor turtles. I even have one now. I feel bad for him. Yeah, the turtles are a really hard life. If we have any other questions, we'll hang out for another minute. I don't see any. I'm going to scroll up real quick and make sure we didn't miss any, but I think everyone hit them pretty well. Otherwise, let me see. We have another webinar this Thursday at 3 p.m. If anyone's free, please come to that one as well. It is going to be with Kayla and Kimberly Corriere. They started an organization called Plastic Free Mermaids, and it spreads awareness about plastic pollution through education, outreach, and cleanups. They will be talking to us a little bit about our local issues with that plastic pollution, and teaching us about their programs. So if you're free Thursday at 3 p.m., please come on back. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming today, everyone. I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much, Derek, for this awesome presentation. We love our virtual dissections here, and this was super, super cool. Hopefully we will see you all again soon. So thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.